Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Crime and Entertainment. Now, we have here today a very interesting guest that's going to help shed some light on a few things involving the Chicago outfit. He's got quite a story, and, I'm not going to say unlike some, but he's one of the few that provides a lot of documentation to back up a lot of his stories, and he sent me quite a bit of stuff through email, and we're going to get into that today. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show, Chuck Macelli. Chuck, how you doing, my friend?
Hey, how you doing, Wade? I'm doing great, brother. I'm glad to be on your show. It's an honor.
Well, I'm glad to have you. I've been wanting to get you on here for a minute. I know you had a little health bout there. I'm glad you're through that and able to come on and share your story with us today. For those of our listeners that might not be too familiar with who you are, before we get into a lot of the deep dive into this, let's kind of just give them a backstory a little bit, tell them who you are, where you come up, and kind of how you got involved in the outfit. Like, did you see them at an early age and that type of thing?
Yeah, like 5 minutes after I was born.
Well, that's that.
Well, as soon as I met Dad, it was all over with. The story was kind of written.
Right.
I grew up in Elmwood Park and on the northwest side of Chicago. Elmwood Park back in the day, 60s, 70s, 80s was pretty much the Italian enclave. If you were outfit, if you were a city worker, if you were Italian, German, Polish, not so much Irish, you were living on the northwest side. A lot of the Irish were down in Bridgeport, where Mayor Daley, both Mayor Daleys, in fact, were from, and that name speaks for itself. And there was some Italian enclaves down in Chinatown and, down on Grand and Ogden and stuff, which I ended up becoming very close to someone that ran the Grand and Ogden crew, which has been well publicized already, Joseph Lombardo. Where do I start with my life? My parents had a very rocky marriage. I don't sugarcoat this. I'm writing a book, and it's not like I hold anything back. My dad was a 27-year-old guy, just come out of the Army, didn't really want a wife and kid. He got married because back then that was the thing to do when you got somebody pregnant. And he wanted to be with his friends and in the street and around the outfit guys, and my mom just wasn't having it. Long story short, to explain how my involvement at such an early age into the outfit came to be, we were living in a building in Elmwood Park, Illinois, and it was one of the few at that time major high rises in Elmwood Park. It was called Autumn Terrace back then, and I had a very unfortunate circumstance. My dad wasn't being very kind to my mom, and he had a very nasty side to him. My mother attempted suicide. She had cut her wrists up both ways 5 or 6 times. And back in those days, as I've said in other interviews, and it's been investigated and verified and all this kind of stuff, this was in the 70s. You could call your kid home from school back then. And for whatever my mother's thought process was, she had called the school and they sent me home in a cab. And I walked into the apartment, obviously saw my mother not in good condition. And I ran out screaming into the hall like any 7 or 8-year-old would have done. And I ran slam into the arms of Joe Lombardo, AKA Joey the Clown Lombardo, AKA Lumpy, AKA at that time, one of the capos of the organized, outfit in Chicago. That is my first cognizant relationship that grew with Lumpy. From that point on, he wasn't, let's take Godfather and Casino and all that to the side. In every essence of the word, he was my godfather. He didn't baptize me, but he overwatched me. He overwatched my career in politics. He overwatched my upbringing with my father to a certain degree. He helped my mom tremendously. There was never any inappropriate stuff between them. He looked at my mom like a daughter. And I ended up getting a bond to him, just like, my friends, the Seifert brothers, even though it's alleged that Joey murdered their father or was involved in it, until recently, they didn't know the truth. Joe and Nick will both tell you, and I think you may be interviewing them in the near future. I'm not sure. Um, they grew up calling him Uncle Joe.
Right.
To this day, Nick and Joey both have they have a lot of confused, mixed up emotions in their heart about him. We've put a lot of that to sleep over the last 6 months. As I got older and went through grade school and high school and stuff, I was the kid with the big ears, the buck teeth, the funny clothes from Kmart because my family wasn't rich. And I had an uncle that was very heavily involved in organized crime as an associate. His name was Tom Schreiber. And there had come a time when I was still in school that my mother had gotten a job that, by the way, Joe got her. And one day Tom got called upon to do something. That was September 27, 74, the day that Joey Seifert's father was executed. My uncle, not to disparage his memory because I love him dearly, but people don't know the whole story with him. At 15, he was struck by a car and thrown 65 feet in the air. They had to shock literally half of his brain back into working.
Wow.
And this is a man that not only graduated from 3 police academies, okay, and became a Cook County deputy sheriff, Cook County Forest Preserve policeman, and an enforcer for the mob, that couldn't even read and write very well. And, you have to understand, and for your viewers, and I'm sure your viewers in your genre understand that you can take New York, you can take LA, you can take Dallas, you can take New Orleans, you can take Florida, and wipe those off the map when it comes to Chicago. Chicago is its own thing. We don't operate, and we've never operated or been allowed to operate the way any other outfit organizations have run. And I attribute that, and I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but I attribute the longevity that they had here in Chicago to one fact. It's always been very traditional and old school here. We didn't hang out on the corner with gold chains and, $5,000 suits walking up with 5 bodyguards around us. It just wasn't done that way. The guys in the outfit in Chicago wore jeans, sweatshirt like you're wearing, flannel shirt, had city jobs, and went to work every day. They ran their businesses, of course. They did the things that they did. So as me growing up as a kid, and Joe Seifert and Nick Seifert will tell you the same thing, we didn't see him as, oh my God, this is Tony Accardo, or oh my God, this is Sam Giancana, or this is Anthony Spilatro, or hey, that's cousin Tony, that's Uncle Jimmy, he works for the sewer department. It was a different culture for us. So, dad comes home and he's got 3 new dresses for mom that fell off the back of a truck. It's just, it was a way of life, I guess. That's the best way to put it. After that instance where Joe saved my mother's life, he basically told my father, and I didn't know this till many years later, if he ever did what he was doing to my mother again, Joe would put him in a trunk. And at that time in 74, 75, 76, Joe Lombardo telling you that would be about the equivalent of Jesus Christ coming down saying he's sending you to hell because your ticket was paid for. After that, my mom didn't have many problems out of my dad with his own friends, was affiliated very heavily with certain people I won't mention because some of them are still alive. And when I got older, I didn't want to live at home. I came from a dysfunctional second marriage, which my stepfather is, being a 55-year-old man now looking back, I think he was one of the greatest men I ever met. Growing up is wondering where dad's at, I gave that poor guy hell. I moved out at 17 and I had a choice. We'll either go in the army or get a job. So we tried the army thing. My mother got cancer in her breast and I had to come home, and I started in politics. And you would not believe, and your viewers may or may not know, um, politics and the mob go hand in hand in Chicago.
Oh yeah.
You know, you don't get a job. You don't get a job unless you're connected. You
Mm.
know, it was always, especially like The Godfather, and I know it's coming up on the 50th anniversary. I don't think Martin Scorsese, Mario Puzo, or any of them really understood the influence that it had, because like my dad worked for the city of Chicago. If you got promotion to a boss, they called that getting made.
Mhm.
You know, it made such an impact on the Italian community in Chicago. If you wanted a special license plate on your car, you had to have. Now you can go get any plate you want just by applying to the Secretary of State.
Mhm.
In the 70s and 80s, if you had a 3-letter initial plate, you practically knew the governor. You know,
Wow.
and who held the strings to the governor? Tony Accardo, Jackie Cerrone, Joey Iupa, more than anybody, Sam Giancana. There's two enclaves in Chicago on the northwest side. You have Elmwood Park, and there was a predominant, where I'm from, was a predominantly very heavily populated with mob associates, mob capos, and guys that were kind of like wannabes. Then you had Washington, D.C. of the mob, River Forest.
Mhm.
All the bosses lived there. Between River Forest and Oak Park, Illinois, which were adjoining towns with Elmwood Park, you had a 4-corner intersection at Harlem and North where it was Chicago, Oak Park, River Forest, and Elmwood Park. And at those 4 corners, believe it or not, Wade, there was a restaurant back in the day called the Golden Bear. Now, other guests that you've had, like Red Wimet and some other people, I'm sure Red will remember. Golden Bear on Saturday and Sunday, you almost had to have an invitation to walk in the door. If you weren't connected, you didn't know the right people, you got stares when you walked in there. You know, and Joey and I laugh about it because us as kids growing up in there, you know, you put your best clothes on to go to breakfast on Saturday or Sunday, you got out of line, you caught a crack. You might not have caught a crack from one person, you caught it from 4 or 5 guys. It was, like, hey, what the hell's the matter with you? So I experienced and I lived that my whole life. When I got old enough, I decided I had a crazy idea. My first job was with the clerk of the circuit court of Cook County, and I was a deputy clerk. And my uncle Tom was a deputy sheriff, and I had already seen and done and knew from growing up what the outfit was all about.
Mhm.
And I went to my mom and I said, I don't want to work in the court system. I don't want to be an attorney. I want to be a cop. And at that time, my dad was the one that had more influence in his friends with getting me into the sheriff's department. That was how I got so heavily tied into organized crime, because in Chicago, I don't know what they call it where you're from, but in Chicago, in Alderman, there's 50 wards in the city of Chicago.
Right. They call them all
Uh,
down there. Yeah.
right. And in those 50 wards, those aldermen are like miniature gods.
Right.
They control everything. You back in the day, if you did the biggest favor you could do for somebody back in the 80s was bring them, believe it or not, a 55-gallon drum garbage can. You were I don't know. Do you have like language restrictions on this?
No, no, absolutely not.
Okay, if you brought somebody a 55-gallon garbage can, you were a fucking king. If somebody could call you up and you were a precinct captain and they needed a garbage can and you brought them 2 garbage cans, oh my God, you had the whole family voting for you. If you could cut down a tree or fix a pothole, they might as well, they're going to put St. Charles up on the wall. You got that affiliation. Well, the aldermen, with all the power and strength they had, the guys that pulled their strings were the guys that ran the outfit.
Right.
So when it come down to really doing anything, you got an alderman, like certain aldermen, and many have been indicted. In fact, there's a couple under indictment here right now, a couple of the old school guys, one that's very near and dear to my heart, and I hope he beats the case, Alderman Burke, because he's probably one of the best men I've ever met in my life. Known his wife all my life. I grew up my mother worked in the courts with her, Justice Ann Burke. But you have to understand, with all the power they had, who puts them in office? And that's where we get to. I could go to the alderman to get my county job, but if I didn't have somebody that was putting that alderman in his seat with votes and could pick up the phone and call the unions and could call the plumbers union or different large corporations that the outfit had its hands in back then, like the restaurant industry and the movie industry and all that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if they write 100,000 books and make 10 million movies. John Kennedy would have never been president if it wasn't for Sam Giancana.
Oh, absolutely. I've talked about that on numerous podcasts. I mean, him getting that vote for Chicago, that was a big deciding vote for Illinois. That was the really the sway that got JFK in there. And to your point of what you were just talking about, much like the mob was trying to do with JFK to get them in there to try to maybe alleviate or take away some of the pressure that they were putting on them, which it wound up having the exact opposite effect. But the outfit guys would put these aldermen in these positions because they knew they could go to them and get favors. Like you said, you go up and ask for a job. Hey, he's got a job. So you put these guys in the right positions to be able to make it easier for your people to operate, and you do favors. And it's always a one hand wash or scratches the other back, the old saying. That's the whole point and why they were doing it. But yeah, I absolutely agree. If Momo, Sam Giancana hadn't have done what he done, John F. Kennedy probably would not have got the presidency.
And just to expand a little bit on what you said, even though he got the Illinois vote, you got to understand, at the time that Kennedy was elected, Momo's reach was so far, coast to coast, from Canada to Cuba.
Mm-hmm.
Teamsters, liquor distributors, waiters union, movie house unions, every union there was, Momo had control over to one degree, or he knew someone, or Lucky, Charlie Luciano, or the guys that were involved, in the New York families. Do you think in I don't remember the year, but in 55, do you think that all this was a coincidence, Appalachia?
Oh, no.
Remember when they all got caught running in the woods? Okay. Yeah. It was a stupid move that meeting was supposed to happen in Chicago, and for whatever reason it didn't. But when the commission sat down back then, and it wasn't John F. Kennedy, no disrespect to President Kennedy, but do you understand, it wasn't JFK that got him put in the presidency, it was his dad, Joe.
Right. Yeah, Joe was a bootlegger from back in the day too. I mean, he had these mob ties way before those guys, and that's who reached out and I think set all this in motion to get him in the presidency.
Well, and what he also got his son killed, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Because here's the deal. The one thing that a lot of your viewers may not understand outside of Chicago, there's three main rules when you're in the outfit. You don't lie to the boss, you don't steal from the boss, and you don't embarrass the boss.
Mm-hmm.
Whoever the boss is. Those three things will get you killed really quick. And you got to understand, Joe Kennedy goes to Sam and says, I need your help. And I need your help from Frank Sinatra. Now, my close personal friend, and he's a distant relation to me, cousin, Carl Mano, but he uses Giancana for, publicity purposes. Mm-hmm. He ran the Mob Museum that's closed now in Vegas for a while and stuff. We'll even come on a show and tell you, and we've been on Joe Seifert's show. Joe Kennedy comes to Sam and said, I need help from Frank Sinatra. Momo goes to Sinatra. Sinatra gets all of his movie people, and the one little tiny thing that Sinatra asked for is, I want the president to come to my home. Once JFK is made president, I'd like him to honor me by coming to my home in appreciation. Respect used to be everything.
Mm-hmm.
What did them dumb sons of bitches do? Sinatra builds a heliport for Marine One, and they tell him, "Abafungu, go fuck yourself. We ain't coming." And then on top of it, even after they snubbed Frank like that, who Momo went to for a favor, all the stories about Marilyn Monroe, yeah, that's all a bunch of happy horse shit, because I grew up at certain people's knees. I know the truth. They were told one thing. After Sam's second wife passed away, he fell in love with a woman named Phyllis McGuire from the McGuire sisters.
Yep, McGuire sisters, yep.
The Kennedys were told, stay the fuck away from Phyllis. And they didn't. I don't care about the election. I don't care about the Bay of Pigs. I don't care about nothing. I know Momo died when I was little, but I have personal family, and my grandfather and my stepfather, who actually worked in the man's home and knew him very, very well. That was what fucking iced the cake.
Mm-hmm.
When they crossed that threshold and things happened between Phyllis and the Kennedy boys, and not just one, but both of them, their ticket was punched. And whether it was CIA involved in the grassy knoll, and whoever Sam used or manipulated or co-conspired with, I guarantee you that order came out of Sam Giancana's mouth. Do what you got to do. Because he was very funny about certain things. And once he laid something down to be law, that was it. It was law. Mm-hmm. And another thing I'd like to address on your show, I'm hearing a lot of noise from people about Tony Accardo killing Sam Giancana. And I think your audience would like to hear this. Absolutely. And cut. I'm sorry.
I was saying, absolutely. I don't particularly agree with that, but go ahead with your point there, because I'd love to hear it, but I don't particularly agree with that either.
You're absolutely correct. Let me explain something to you. Did the order get the nod from Accardo? I'm sure. Did the order get the nod from Iupa and Lombardo and maybe quite distantly, possibly Cerrone, meaning those were like the big guys at this time? Mm-hmm. Yes. But Joe Batters, Tony Accardo, walking from his house in River Forest or driving from River Forest to Oak Park to go in the side door and pop 2 rounds or 3 rounds or whatever it ended up being in Sam Giancana is about the likelihood of my dog turning, she's a Siberian Husky, okay? Or I'm sorry, into a fucking gorilla. I mean, it's that ludicrous. Number one, the guy that made the silencer is related to me. And this is where we'll get into the whole thing with the family secrets case. I've heard guys say, oh yeah, I drove by and I heard the shots the day they killed Giancana. Motherfucker, you must be Superman, because they used a screen.
Yeah.
You know? It's just the stuff that people come out with, even on these podcasts. Wade, I had one guy, and I won't mention his name, got on one podcast. Oh, I've known Chuckie for years. I never met him in my life. When I became active and I became a heavy, where I was actually doing things I probably wish I wasn't doing, okay? This guy was getting ready to go hide because he was ratting people out. And the things that he did for the outfit at the time that he did them for, no disrespect, but he was shit on my shoes. I was an errand boy and a do boy. I'll be the first one to admit it. I was a soldier. At the time I came in, I did a lot of things for a lot of people. But what this guy did, and I wasn't way up on the totem pole in 86, 87, 88. That came later. This guy was shit under my shoes with the things that he did for the family. I wasn't even allowed to go near people like that because of my connections to Joe and my father's friends and a guy named Igor that I ended up, when I went into the sheriff's department, it's not a secret now, and you already know about it. There was an indictment that came out in 1992, U.S. versus Novelli. And I believe the case is 92 CR 363, if I remember right. Your people can look it up in the federal courts, Northern District of Illinois. This guy was selling our jobs, Wade. And when I went and asked to be a police officer, the alderman said, okay, I'm going to put you with my guy in the sheriff's office. Brought this guy in. I shit you not. They called him Igor. He was hunched over. He had one eye that went that way, one eye that went straight and looked at you. And he kind of talked like this. I was a young kid, stars in my eyes, and I'm looking at like, this guy's going to help me? And he had a barber shop where he cut hair for a living, you know, as a full-time job. And he was a part-time deputy sheriff. But he, at that time, he was so close to the sheriff of Cook County, he was the conduit between the alderman, the mob, and the sheriff. And the guy he had ran the entire merit board, which was the system under which you got your job. Mm-hmm. So you're gonna get a laugh out of this. So I get called in. Alderman says, go talk to Igor, and he's gonna be your mentor. You're up under him now. That was like being in a crew. Little did I know that Igor actually had a crew, and very close to the Grand Avenue crew, and very tied to the Elmwood Park crew. In fact, a member of it. He says, okay, kid, it's going to cost you $800. And I'm like, all right, so what do I do? He says, I'll tell you when and where to go. So me being naive and wet behind the ears, I go and I call my dad, and I said, Dad, what do I do? He says, Chuckie, this is part of life. I said, no, I don't have that kind of money. My dad borrowed me the money. He says, you go down there and you do whatever the fuck them people tell you to do. You keep your mouth shut. You're going to get your job. So I get the call. I get told to go down to the county building. I walk into this guy's office. It was a chief inspector of the Cook County Sheriff's Merit Board. I get told to ask for a guy named Jack Novelli. Guy comes out, big guy, craggy voice. Come on with me, kid. I says, where are we going? He goes, we're going for a walk. We go for a walk down the hallway. There's a men's room there. Come on in the men's room with me. I'm like, I don't want the job that fucking much. And I'm sitting there thinking in my mind, he says, let's go. And he says, you bring that envelope for me? And I said, yes, sir. You go put it on that stall in there, and I'll meet you back out in the hallway. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, thank God, So I put the money in there. I walked out. The guy walks out to me, pats me on the back, gives me a big hug, goes in his suit coat pocket. You remember, well, you're probably too young, but do you remember Scantron test things? Mm-mm. Okay, well, your viewers probably will. When in the 70s and 80s, they were a strip of paper, probably about the size of a letter size envelope. And you colored in the dots on it, and that's how you took a test.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know what you're talking about now.
He puts mine up on the wall. He fills in all these dots. He says, come here, kid. Sign your name there. I signed my name. He goes, congratulations. You just got a fucking 90 on the police exam. You're hired. I never even looked at a police exam. And everything was fine. I ended up getting hired. And for some reason, they backdated my birth certificate. The guy was not the smartest card in the deck. To this day, we don't know why, but he backed me up a year forward instead of a year backward because I wasn't allowed to take the test till I was 21. So he changed my date from 66 to 67 when he meant to change it to 65. And a big investigation ensued. And I didn't know no better. I mean, I kept my mouth shut initially. And then we found out that he was selling jobs to everybody. Him and the sheriff were selling jobs to everybody and anybody that had money.
Wow.
And the feds got wind of it. And I got pissed off because I had 5 people I sent to them and they all lost their jobs. And when the feds came to me, I told the truth. I said, yeah, this is what he was doing. He got greedy. You know, he was disrespecting people. And this is what leads into the family secrets case as well, because they talked to me about this in 1990. And I told them everything that they needed to know about what was going on with this and the criminality in politics in the sheriff's department. And they said in 1990, oh, there's nothing to this. You're full of shit. 2 years later, in 92, they indicted and convicted him on a plea deal. And if you look at the reports of what I have, the reports from 1990, and if you look at what happened to him and what he was indicted for, I was applicant number 4, an unindicted co-conspirator in the indictment. Wow. But the corrupt feds said I was full of shit. And that was what put me on my path to basically, I became involved in debt collection, intimidation. There was several people I had to, deal with. I'll leave it at that. And I went through my life basically because of Joe Lombardo. I wasn't one of the guys that sat at the social club and paid pinochle. I wasn't one of the guys that hung out on the street corners or ran there. What I did, I was isolated. And I'm not trying to make myself into something I'm not. But when I got the call, you weren't going to have too many more chances.
Now, were you still law enforcement at this time?
For a while, yeah.
Okay. So before we get too far into that, I do want to backtrack for 1 second.
Sure.
Just to make sure that a lot of our listeners understand, and like you said earlier, Sam Giancana Momo, who is, sometimes referred to, his reach, like you said, was massive. And he was eventually shot. That murder, I think, to this day is still unsolved. Like you said, everybody seems to know who did it and, heard it and everything else. There's nothing to been proven to that point. I know it's long since been rumored that, what was it? Butch, what was his name?
Butch Blasey.
Butch Blasey. Yeah. That he was the trigger man. I mean, that's still never been proven. If you had to take a guess, would you agree with it being Butch?
No.
Butch,
he would have never done that.
Yeah. I mean,
I think.
Oh, it probably had to be someone that he was close with, I would think, to be able to get in there and get in his kitchen, because as it's been kind of documented, he was downstairs cooking, I think it was dinner, but he was cooking like sausage and peppers or something like that.
Making sausage and peppers. And let me tell you something, the person that actually pulled that trigger, okay, whoever he or she may have been, was somebody that was very, very close. I don't think that Butch wasn't somewhat complacent in it. I think he got told to go take a walk because you got to realize there was other caretakers upstairs in the upper part of the home.
Right.
I think not only that, and much like in the Seifert case, it was kind of funny. Sam had 24-hour surveillance on him from somebody at all times. But the day that this happened, there's no police, law enforcement presence at all.
Right.
Okay. That's suspicious in and of itself. Just like the day that the star witness in the case with Danny Seifert, even though he's, from what Joey and Nick told me, that his dad denied protection. I got a star witness even back in the 70s. Even if this guy tells me go fuck myself, I don't want you protecting me, and he's my case. I don't know too many federal prosecutors or FBI agents that aren't going to say, okay, well, we can't be up his ass like we'd like to be, but we're damn sure going to be down the block when this guy's getting ready to go to the grand jury in a day or two. And this isn't a week or two or a month or two.
Yeah.
You know,
very, very close proximity.
If shit's on the floor, it's going to stink. It's shit. You know what I'm saying? You can't change it. And you're absolutely right.
Yeah. Now, I mean, that's a long time been a, I guess a big question of who took him out, because Momo's reach, at that time, it had, dwindled, I'd say, a little bit. I know what was he moved to Mexico or something like that for a while?
He was in Mexico for a while.
Yeah, and he come back. So, I mean, he still had his power. His name was still there, but I agree. It had to be somebody that was very close, because Momo was no average guy. He wasn't going to let just any and everybody around him. I mean, he was a smart guy. He was a wise guy to every extent of the word. So he wasn't just going to let any and everybody around him to give them that opportunity. Obviously somebody did, but that's that.
If you think about it, the man was so smart. He was able to create and control Vegas, create and control the presidency, to put a man in presidency. He wasn't a stupid man.
Exactly.
Whoever it was someone that he trusted. Right. And I want to make a little jump off a little tiny side road here.
No, you're good.
Because this is a thorn in my side personally. And it's also a thorn in Carl Mano's side, who is, to explain who Carl Mano is, Sam had 3 daughters. Annette was his oldest daughter. Carl is Annette's 3rd son. And Frank Calabrese Jr., the rat that testified against his own father, because he robbed his grandmother and didn't want his father to find out, robbed his own father, was a cokehead, and you name it, he did it, has been going around Chicago lately, publicly giving interviews. I know who killed Sam Giancana. I want to say something publicly, and this is the first time I'm speaking of it, so you're kind of getting an exclusive on your show. When I have a proffer agreement with the United States government when I cooperated in 2001, and I'm not ashamed of the fact that I did. You know why. I've sent you that paperwork. We'll get into that. When you sign one of those agreements, they are very strict in the fact that you tell them what you know to a certain degree if it's a limited scope agreement. But when you lay waste to as many people as him and his uncle did, they bring you in a room for a day, a week, a month, whatever it is, and you bare your soul. So for this guy to be coming out here now saying, oh, I know who killed Sam Giancana and I'll never tell, or maybe someday I will, that's a lie. And it's a lie for 2 reasons. One, had he done so and the government knew about it, they would be under obligation to notify the family that the case was closed. I can guarantee you personally that has not happened. The second part of it is, if he withheld that information from the government, his proffer agreement isn't worth the paper it's written on, and he should be re-indicted for everything that he did.
Correct.
So, Frank Calabrese, you're a fucking liar.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people I don't think understand is when you get these agreements, you basically, like you said, you have to bear your soul. You have to give all. Any information that you leave out, the least little bit, if it comes out that you hid something, that whole thing, no matter what, you could have given them enough to get 15, 20, 10,000 indictments. It doesn't matter. If you hide that one thing and they find out about it, your whole agreement's void and you're up the river. So you're exactly right to your point is if he's truthfully saying he's withheld information, then that proffer agreement is voided.
Yep. And it leaves you open for a lot. And the point is, he's doing it for profiteering reasons with his little tour bus or hot dog stand or whatever it is he's trying to do. Does he have the minutest conception of Sam has 5 grandsons here in Chicago? He has 3 daughters. Is he that how do I explain? Heartless is the word I want.
Yeah.
To say something like that publicly and dangle a carrot in front of their face, like these people haven't had the knowledge of knowing what really happened to someone that they dearly love. And that's another thing. Everybody thinks gangsters are murderers, killers, rape. Well, not rape, because that's not allowed, but pillage, plunder, whatever. All these guys, Tony Accardo, Iupa, Cerrone, Sam, down to your soldiers, we got families. We go home like you do, go to soccer games, have barbecues. It's, yes, the mob is there 24/7 for you, but we have what everybody else has, especially in Chicago. It's low key. You can go all over the internet now and see different pictures on these different mob blogs and stuff like this. A guy sitting out in lawn chairs, having cigarettes and stuff. It's not like 24 hours. Hey, who are we going to rob? Who are we going to murder? Who are we going to kill?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
a lot of that's bullshit.
Yeah, a lot of that's fabrication. I think this is a good chance here to try to segue, because you mentioned, Sam had a lot to do in Vegas. For those that don't know and has never seen the movie Casino, which I'm sure everybody listening to this episode probably has seen the movie Casino. The character in that movie, Nicky Santoro, was played by Joe Pesci, and he was kind of sent out there to Vegas to keep things in line, control the skim and things like that. That was based on a real character, or real man rather, Tony Spilotro. Now, you mentioned him earlier. Now, Tony was from Chicago. They sent him out there to Vegas, and he pretty much ran that. Now, the Teamsters Fund, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the Teamsters Fund was basically, given the outfit, they built the casinos on that, but then in return, the outfit received the skim, much like you've seen in the movie. Is that correct? All right. So when all this started happening,
the Teamsters were a piggy bank.
Right. When all this started happening, Anthony is real. I'm going to use his real name, not the character of the movie name, but Tony Spilotro, he was leaving a lot of bodies out there. But before all this, he was heavily involved in the Chicago outfit. He was a bookmaker. He was there for years. Now, there is, and we've talked about it earlier, the murder involving Danny Seifert. Why don't you real quick kind of give our listeners a little background on Danny Seifert and then explain that whole deal, because that's a big point of contention with Joe Lombardo's involvement, Tony Spilotro's involvement. Kind of give us a little background on Danny Seifert and then how that particular murder went down. And what's even crazier is now your relation to Joey Seifert, after all this is done.
Here's the gist of it. In 74, when this happened, my Uncle Tom was a wannabe soldier. Mm-hmm. He got a call one day. He was babysitting me because my mother was working. He had worked at the time at the Cook County Forest Preserve District, and he had taken an injury. He got a phone call early in the morning, and he said, "Kid, come on, you got to come with me. We got to do something." He still had a cast on his leg. I don't remember the time, if it was 6 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock, and 6:30 in the morning. I'm helping him with a butcher knife, saw the fucking cast off of his leg so he can get in the car and drive to go do whatever it was, whoever called him at the house and said, "Get where you got to go." He grabs a blanket for me. We stop at a place called Gas City. He buys me a soda pop, some candy, puts me in the back of his car, throws it over. He said, "You fucking stay down there and don't get up and don't say a word. Don't do nothing. Don't come out under that blanket until I tell you to." Didn't know then what I know now. We made one stop at a man's home named Richard Medea, who was a corrupt Chicago police officer. Weapons were picked up, and then a trip was made to Bensonville to the plastics factory. At that time, Frank Schweiz, Tony Spilotro, Richard Medea, my Uncle Tom Schreiber, John Feccarata were involved in the hit. According to the family secrets version, according to the casino version, and according to other versions from many, many, many people, including the judge in the trial of the murder of this case, an 8-year-old boy couldn't possibly have been there. I've done everything but including up to and inclusive of going all the way to the Illinois Appellate Court to try to get heard. And there's a motion currently pending before a new judge because the judge that tried the case is retired, to try to get me in to testify to something else involving Spilatro. But the team that went in, I cannot say one way or another from that day, going back in time, who was inside the building. I only personally know that Richard Medea and Thomas Schreiber were outside, and that Medea was the one that I believe with my whole heart fired the shots and that killed Danny's dad, or that killed Danny Seifert, Joey's dad. I know we left there. I know my uncle had the shotguns afterwards. I know that there was other things that I cannot talk about right now in case I have to testify. I'm not going to taint my testimony.
Correct.
That will corroborate me. I also know fast forward between 74 and 86 when Spilatro was executed, the two people that were there, of the three people I know that were in there, and possibly four, Joe Lombardo, I know several things that are fact. If Joey Lombardo was there, and Joey knows we split hairs on this, I'm not completely convinced that Joe Lombardo was there. Emma Seifert swears up and down that she recognized Lumpy's gait and his demeanor with the mask on when he put him in the bathroom. If he in fact did put Emma and Joey, which nobody had a clue Joey was going to be there, in the bathroom.
He was supposed to be in school, right?
Right. He played hooky that day. He faked like he was sick.
Okay.
If Joe was there, he went there for one reason and one reason only, to keep Emma alive.
Right.
Because Spilatro, Feccarata, and more so Schweiz did not leave witnesses behind.
You're talking about
They would
John
have went in there and
right?
killed every fucking. Yes, that's why Feccarata got killed. By the way, they would have killed every fucking thing in that building, including the cockroaches, if they could have. When the hit went bad, because it was Tony Spilatro's fault, they were supposed to handcuff Danny, take him somewhere else, away from there, to execute him. Feccarata and Joey would be better to tell you the story than me, or his documentary. Danny was a pretty good boxer, and there was always a point of contention between Spilatro and Danny about who was kind of tougher and faster with the hands. Well, Spilatro was small in stature and didn't have a long reach, where Danny was really quick and really strong and had a long reach. And they used to jib each other about, hey, Tony, why don't you come on down here and let Danny take, you and Danny go a couple rounds. And, that never obviously happened. The day that it happened was the day that they tried to take Danny down, and he got away from Feccarata, and John Feccarata was a big guy. He got away from Schweiz. He got away from Spilatro, and Spilatro ended up putting a bullet through Danny's cheek. Danny escaped out the door to where the backup team, which was Tom Schreiber and Rick Medea and maybe other people, and they executed him. I know because I heard it out of his mouth myself that Spilatro wanted to go in there and kill Emma and Joey. And there was a fight about that from 74 to 86, even when Joe Lombardo was in prison. Anthony Accardo about blew his top. You could have peeled him off the ceiling. He was so fucking mad that went down in front of a child. Okay. It's just not the way Chicago does things. But those guys, when you sent Schweiz, Spilatro, and Feccarata out to do something, there wasn't no turning them back. It was it. That's it. The switch is on, they're going, it's getting done, no matter what.
Yeah, those weren't guys to be trifled with one way or the other right there.
No, because Anthony had a temper that would pop like this, and just like Joe Pesci played the role that he didn't portray the truth, but the role that he played of what they gave him to play, he nailed Spilatro. Right. He nailed him, his attitude to a T. And then when Spilatro got in trouble, getting too big for his britches, saying he was going to kill his way to the top, you just don't say things like that when you're in the outfit. You could think it all you want. You don't say it.
Right.
And that's when him and Michael got hustled in and they went to Bensonville. They, the story the government has is a guy named James Marcello, who was the boss of Chicago at the time, was the one that made the phone call and brought him in.
Mm-hmm.
What the government never looked at, because they wouldn't allow me to testify, was the fact that the voice of James Marcello and the at that time voice of Richard Medea are very, very similar. And I know as sure as I'm sitting in this chair that it was Richard Medea that made that phone call and picked him up and drove them there, because he was a Chicago police officer and he was a close friend of Tony's. And what transpired after that, I can't talk about right now, because there is a motion in the court to try to help James get another hearing on this. But what I can tell you, Casino did not go down anything like it really went down.
Mhm.
They weren't. One guy last night I saw on the internet had a guy in a suit and a tie like this in a hole with mud and dust all over him. Number one, they didn't have any clothes on. Number two, the bodies were perpendicular to one another. And number three, that's not what the crime scene looked like, okay, at all. So people, again, don't know what they're talking about, and they put themselves out there like they're authorities, and they're just making jackasses out of themselves.
Yeah, well, Nick Calabrese, another one that we mentioned earlier, he claims to be at that hit. I think is they put Feckerata there as well, I believe, according to the government.
Nicky was there. Feckerata was there. There was, put it this way, it was a concerted effort because Tony was so high up on the food chain. The one thing I agree with Red Wemette about is they wanted to spread the blame here. Like it wasn't just one person. It's very similar to when Gotti took out Castellano.
Right.
You know, everybody thinks, and let me ask you, and I mean, you're the interviewer, but I'm asking the interviewer a question. I mean, no disrespect.
No, absolutely.
What's your take on why Castellano got killed?
Well, I mean, I think it was quite a few different things. The one being the most prevalent is I think if he got his hands on those tapes that had the Gotti's crew dealing drugs, I think they would have been executed. And I think John knew that. Another thing is a lot of people don't realize that it was kind of an embarrassing thing, but Paul was caught, I think, having an affair with his maid at the time.
Right.
And there was even accusations of him trying to get a surgery for like to fix his penis, I guess would be the best word to describe it. So that was definitely
He had to fix his
not a
piece
great
of
look.
deal.
Yeah, fixed a piece of deal. And then also Paul was also under indictment as well at the time. So there was really no set what he was going to do, how he was going to react. Paul was not a street guy. He grew up in the mob, but he was more of the upper echelon. He dealt with the white collar side of it. John was more of the blue collar side. So I think everything was kind of stacked as you got a guy, you don't really know what's going to happen. He's already got some embarrassing stuff coming out. And you know, if he gets his hands on these set of tapes that's admitting that your crew is dealing drugs, you're probably going to get clipped. So he knew that it was going to be him or Paul, and he made the decision to do what he did.
Okay, can I tell you something?
Absolutely.
You're spot on. You're spot on looking at it from, and I think that's his picture behind you.
That's actually Robert De Niro from Goodfellas.
De Niro. Okay. You're spot on about Gotti's reasons, but do you know why the commission allowed it?
Well, from what I understand, he didn't have full support, especially from what the Gigante side. But no, I know I'm not 100% privy to why they allowed it. I mean, I think that I really don't know, to be 100%.
I'll tell you the truth. There was an underboss under Don Carlo Gambino. In my opinion, the last of the true Dons of New York, you know, the honorable old timers that lived by the old rules, you know, and lived and breathed and bled Omerta. His underboss was Neil Delacroce.
Mm-hmm.
Paul Castellano, once he became boss because he was related to Don Carlo, is the only reason he got that nod. Everybody knows that. When Neil died, the dirty rat piece of shit son of a bitch sent a flower arrangement and didn't attend Neil's funeral. That was his fate with the commission. Because no matter who you were in the outfit, even to this day, I think you'd be very hard pressed to find anybody that has anything bad to say about Don Carlo, other than he was very stern, very quietly stern about especially drugs.
Right.
He was loved by everybody, and to snub him like that was the most disrespectful thing you could do. So when Gotti ended up in the predicament he was in, and more so Sammy Gravano, who loved Neil to death, Neil brought him into the family, asked, I want permission to do this. And that's why it got done.
Yeah.
That's
Neil,
why it got done with no repercussions.
Yeah. Neil, to your point, was a stone cold gangster. I mean, if you look up gangster in the dictionary, there's a few people that's going to have their picture by there for sure. That's the embodiment. Tony Accardo being one, Carlo Gambino being one, and there's quite a few, but definitely in that picture lineup, you're going to see Neil Delacroce in there somewhere. I mean, he was a gangster's gangster. So I agree. He probably definitely should have been boss, but the type of gangster he was, he didn't go against that. When Don Carlos said he was making Big Paul the boss, he may not have liked it, but he wasn't about to buck it because that's not how.
And he tried to back, and he tried to back Paul as good as he was allowed to,
right,
to advise him, as consigliere. But you can lead a horse to water. When they're a boss, you can't drown them in it. You can just kind of like shake your head and say, okay, whatever's going to happen is going to happen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And to kind of get back to where we were, Mikey and Tony were both killed. They were found in that cornfield. Well, was it a cornfield? No, it was in Indiana.
It was a cornfield on a farm in Enos, Indiana.
And wasn't that close to? Didn't Iupa own some property up there or something that was fairly?
He had a hunting lodge right across the street. Word has it that the area they really wanted to put him in had too many roots and stuff, and it was too hard of a dig.
Okay.
So that's why it was kind of like on the fly. Hey, we're going here, and we're trying to they were trying to prepare the hole, and they couldn't get it, and they knew that the body was on the way. So it was like, oh fuck, well, hey, that's soft dirt over there. It's a lot easier on our back. And then all hell broke loose.
Yeah, well, he kind of says that in the movie, alluding to you got to do it right. You got to have the hole already dug. He does say that in Casino. But
you know what you're doing,
So that kind of covers the Seifert murder. Tony had his role in that. Eventually, like we said, Tony and his brother Mikey were both executed. There was just too much going on for them to, stay out. They were already under indictment as well. Frank Collada had already agreed to testify. Was probably going to put Tony in jail if he didn't get clipped. And, who knows what would have happened with that. But kind of tell us how Family Secrets came to go to trial, and then what you're doing, as you kind of mentioned earlier, trying to put some stuff to rest right now, currently, even all these years later, that they're still not wanting to hear what you're saying. Because as you said earlier, it was long been said that Marcella was the one that made that phone call. They picked Tony up because it had to be someone that he trusted. Tony, at the same token, like we spoke earlier about Momo, was no dummy, and it had to be someone that he trusted. So if it wasn't Marcella, if it was the cop that you alluded to, that would also make sense. But no FBI or police force or whatever is going to want to put that out there for that to be heard, that a Chicago police officer, FBI, whatever, was involved in that.
Well, if you research Richard Medea, before I get into it, he came on the job in the mid 60s. From the day he came on the job, this guy was under investigation for one thing or another. Okay. He ended up in 74. He beat up a guy, or 74, 75. No, I'm sorry, 69. He beat up a guy named Sixto Cruz, Sixto Cruz. You can read the article in the Chicago Sun-Times or Tribune archive. Then again, he got in trouble in the 70s for beating someone else up, pistol whipping them and stuff like this. And then in the 80s, his home was raided and drugs were found, 15 silencers, which, by the way, carry 10 years per silencer, and, you know, a bunch of other stuff. Then this guy, Medea, all of a sudden, he's not doing 150 years. He's doing less than 4. Now, today, there's no, you could look his case up under Pacer, put his name in the federal database. You can't find him anywhere except on the Bureau of Prisons. You can look up his BOP number to verify that he was in federal custody. So you tell me somebody that's got all that weight sitting on them and cuts a deal, supposedly, which it's not really a secret. And even Joe Seifert will tell you he's verified this through his own independent sources outside of me. That obviously Medea had to give a hell of a lot up. And that's what we lead into Family Secrets with. It's no secret I've been to prison. I went through a very bad divorce in 1995 and 96. I'm not going to get into the specifics of it. All I'm going to say is I had an adulterous wife. She came home pregnant with another man's child. When I tried to pay the guy off to keep rights to the kid, he was a Latin King gangbanger that told me basically go fuck myself. I got HIV and hepatitis and AIDS and everything else. And we had to abort the child. For a while, I went off the rails and my insurance wouldn't cover it. And I wrote a bunch of bad checks, stopped doing contracts in my construction business, and kind of lost my mind for about a good year. And one thing led to another, and that man's not here anymore. The charges were gone. Let's just leave it at that. Okay. I followed the kids down to another state where they're living, which I don't want to mention. And I tried to, you know, get custody of my kids, and I opened up a very large nightclub, family backing, and I got turned in. Hey, my ex-husband's involved in organized crime. You need to watch him. They figured out who I was related to. One thing led to another. I got accused of bilking investors, and basically it was a deal where the guy I bought the property from screwed us because he tried to sell it to me for 1.5 million when he owed 2.1, and he couldn't give me a clear title. So we folded the business and walked away. Well, when you fold a business like that, everybody's pissed off because contracts, people got fired, payroll didn't get made, you know, in the middle of building something or having it opened. And then, you know, you walk in and tomorrow you don't have a job because, well, if we couldn't buy the property, it was worthless. And all my investors pulled out on me and left me hanging with the bag, which was not a good position to be in.
Right.
So I ended up going to trial, got found guilty from a redneck jury. No offense to you Southerners. And I basically, because of who I was, the judge, there was a motion of eliminate filed where they couldn't talk about organized crime because there was no evidence that organized crime was involved in my case. The state's attorney asked who all my investors were, and there was one particular investor that had a very infamous last name. And I knew that this person had given me money. And I got put in a position where the state said, hey, name all your investors and what they gave you. And I looked at my lawyer, and this piece of shit sat there like, you know, and it was like the longest 30 seconds of my life. Finally, he got his lazy ass up and he tells the judge, oh, I think I know what the problem is here, Your Honor. Can we have a sidebar? And they had a little conversation up at the bench, and I'm sitting right there, so I'm hearing it. This crooked judge down there says, I'll allow one question along these lines, make it good. So he made it good. And I had to admit that there was one person with a very infamous last name had lent me money to open the club. Well, the minute I mentioned that name, they convicted me in 24 minutes.
Mm.
And because I wouldn't cooperate when I originally got the case and accept time served and testify against a bunch of people, I told them to go fuck themselves. The state attorney down there and the sheriff said, we will give you 30 years. One thing that I will sit here and say today is that man is a man of his word, 150%. They gave me a 30-year split sentence. They gave me 10 in, 10 out, 10 suspended. I did my first 10. I came home. They found a reason to violate me, sent me back for the next 10. And all during this time, I was fighting my case. And now we get into family secrets. I'm sitting in jail and I'm approached by an ATF agent concerning something totally unrelated to family secrets. And I respect this man so much. I know he's an honest agent. I know you've had a couple guys on your show. I think Jay Dobbins and some other people. I have so much respect for the ATF because they tried to make the case. John Rotuno and his partner came and met with me in Florida, investigated me up one side, down the other, you name it, looked into things, much like with you. I produced documents and independent corroboration, which you have a letter of from them. I was independently corroborated in over 40 incidents of arsons, bombing, extortion, intimidation, murder, you name it. And they turned around and said, okay, we're going to go to Chicago and we're going to unearth these bodies. When we got here, keep in mind, the same prosecutor that prosecuted Richard Medea in 1980 for his case told my ATF agents and my U.S. attorney that I was working with, because now he was the chief of organized crime, I was full of shit that Richard Medea and Tom Schreiber and all these other people that I was discussing with my ATF agents, I didn't know what the fuck I was talking about. I was a liar. So at the time, we didn't know, A, what was going on with Medea because it was so well buried, and B, we didn't know about what was going on with Calabrese. Well, the one body that they wanted to unearth with me was a guy named Michael Albergo. And he had several nicknames. One was Bones, one was Ham Bone. There was a couple others I won't repeat because there's going to be ladies listening to this, but they weren't very laudatory. And when we were out there doing this ridiculous dig, and the ATF has to wear this, they went out there with fucking garden tools to do an excavation in the rain. No, they brought in a forensic scientist from Indiana, or a forensic anthropologist, and the dogs hit on an area. The agents called in for a crime scene, and Mars said, shut it down, get Macelli out of there. So Mitchell Mars, who is now dead and happens to be a very close friend from what I hear to Red Wimet. I'm not knocking Mitch as a man at home with his family, whatever. As a prosecutor, he was corrupt as fuck. Period. So between 2001 and 2005, I get literally castigated in the media. I'm a con man. I'm a liar. I'm full of shit. I sent him on a wild goose chase. And then one day I'm in way southern Florida doing my time. And I get a newspaper that Joe Lombardo's been indicted for the murder of Hambone and the Spilatro murder with Marcello and all this other stuff. And I look at this, and Joe's on the run now. You got to keep in mind that Joe wrote a letter to the court telling the judge he was afraid to come in because the feds could indict a fucking hamburger and get away with it.
Yeah.
And he wanted separation from everybody else, and he wanted some conditions for a fair trial. So Joe's on the run. I read his letter in the papers and I said, I have a debt of honor to this man to tell the truth. No matter what it costs me, I have to do this. I wrote a letter, which was published, and it was in the Sun-Times newspaper, to Judge Zagel saying, hey, y'all fucked up. You got this wrong. You need to talk to me. From 2005 to 2007, well, let me back up a little bit. At that point in 2005, Joe's first attorney, Richard Halpern, who, by the way, blew his brains out, his own brains out, filed an oral motion to get me an attorney and bring me before the court. The judge denied it and said, oh, for reasons stated in open court, I'm denying this. Charles Macelli is not credible. But yet people that were at the trial, like Scott Bernstein, who's does the Gangster Report and OG podcast, Joey Seifert, Nick Seifert, nobody seems to fucking remember this taking place. So now we go forward. I keep going after the court and filing what I can and using my legal education that I have to try to get in there in a motion to intervene. Finally, I must have aggravated Zagel enough. He issues an order, I think it was in 06 or 07, give me an evidentiary affidavit, Chuck, of what you'll bring to this case. I get the order, I'm elated. Wade, I'm like, this is a no-brainer. Not only will I write you an evidentiary affidavit, I'm going to send you a fucking map, which I did. You know what he did with it? He took it, sealed the file, never let anybody sealed it, never issued a ruling on the motion, never denied it, never did nothing, suppressed the evidence like this is bullshit, it don't count, put it to the side. I will challenge anybody to go from 0 to 1662 and the things filed in the family secrets case. You will not find an order other than sealing that motion that was filed. Takes these guys to trial, convicts them with a witness willing to come forward. Keep in mind, at the time I wrote this, I came home in 2008 for a short period of time because I had a 10-year suspended and a 10-year probation sentence. They could have brought me before a grand jury, and if they thought I was lying or thought they could prove I was lying, they could have extended my time indefinitely. So I'm looking at coming out of prison within a year or so, taking that risk. Then I get out, I get a probation violation, which I honestly believe they targeted me for this reason. I do my other 10 years, and all during that 10 years I fight. They don't want to hear me. None of these high dollar lawyers that got paid all this money to represent these clients ever told many of their clients even about me, when each and every one of them got copies of everything I filed. So fast forwarding now to when Joe passes away, I have been personally, and I'm not going to get into it, but I'm going through some personal stuff, and I wasn't in a really good frame of mind in November. I was honestly thinking of taking my life.
You're talking this past November.
Pardon me?
You're talking this past November?
In 21. Yes, in 2021. Going through some very, very serious things, part of which is caused from family secrets and being blackballed for so many years. My mother was very sick and dying. And I had talked to Joe Seifert probably about a year after I got out, and he wanted to talk to me. And I said, Joe, I'm not ready to talk about this to anybody. Then in the interim of that, Joe Lombardo passed away. And I was at the point where I just felt like I didn't have a reason to live. It was a personal thing. And I picked up the phone and I said, I want nothing from you. I don't know you. I didn't know Joey did podcasts. I didn't know he wrote a book. I didn't know he did a movie. I didn't know nothing. I just knew him as Danny's kid. And I gave him my word that someday I would tell him the truth. And Joey and I, much like you and I sent him all the paperwork. We talked. I told Joey things that even Joey will tell you nobody else could have known that wasn't there that day or that didn't know Joe Lombardo very, very well. And that's when Joe said, Chuck, you really need to write a book, do a documentary, do a docuseries, and get this story out. My mother passed away a month later from COVID and COPD. If it wasn't for people that I hold very near and dear to my heart, Carl Mano being one, Christine Champagne being another, and a very scant list of other people out of the long list of people I know all my life, that basically when I started having a hard time or my mom got very sick, they all ran like hell. I said, okay, I got a reason to hold on for a while. And I laid my mother to rest December 27th. And I've been keeping myself going. As you know, I said I've had some major health problems. And I got a phone call and someone asked me, hey, Chuck, can we ask you a question? I said, sure. They said, we know why you were so adamant about helping Joey. Not only that it was the truth and that you had a lot of love for him, but why not help Jim Marcello? We know because you're talking about Medea, what really happened that day in Bensonville. And I can't say why I know so well because I don't want to taint my testimony, but I know as sure as I'm looking at you and you got a black beard and mustache. And I said, okay, I'll give it one more chance. So in March, I constructed a 40-page plus motion with exhibits. I reached out to his current attorney who had a 27-minute conversation with me, sent him some documents. A couple days later, he said, don't ever contact me again. While we were having that conversation, I had mentioned about my credibility with Novelli and all that. And this attorney had the nerve to say, well, I was close personal friends with Novelli and I really don't like what you did. So I can understand why this attorney has an axe to grind with me. I've been threatened with everything under the sun since I came out that I was going to help James. Filed it. It was docketed under 1661, which you've got a copy of.
I've seen it.
And for over a month, I've been waiting for a ruling. Again, nothing. So I called the office of the clerk the other day and I talked to a very nice person and they said, we don't have it. I said, what do you mean you don't have it? It's on the internet. It's filed. She goes, we don't have it, but we have it now because I went and got it and it is on the judge's desk. And I said, well, could I ask you a question, ma'am, please, with respect? Would it help or would it be allowed if I wrote a letter to the judge? So him not knowing all the history with me, and I don't expect the judge, as busy as they are, to read back through 20 some odd years of Chuck Macelli harassing the courts to a degree. Could I put a little synopsis together so the judge doesn't think I'm some kind of lunatic, and takes this seriously? Oh, yes, sir, absolutely. And over this past weekend, that was mailed to the courts, to the attention of Judge Blakey. And I anticipate by the end of this week that it'll be filed into the record. And I was told to call back to make sure it reaches his desk. And that's kind of where we're at.
Well, hopefully that gets there because, at this point, Joe Lombardo obviously has, long since passed away. So there's really nothing that you can do to say, help get him out of this. Obviously, you have the information that could help out, James Marcello. It's just a matter, I think, of what it boils down to. And you and I have had this discussion privately of what they're willing to bring to light. A lot of times when things happen, especially things involving law enforcement, they don't like to put it on display that either they were wrong, they made a mistake, or maybe that one of their own was involved in something they shouldn't have been. That is a big no-no, as I'm sure you're aware of.
Wade, do you know how monumental this would be?
Very.
Some of the actual murders that were committed weren't committed by the big name guys with big deep pockets, okay? I.e. the Spilotro murders.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to throw something out there. Explain something to me. And this is another part of my testimony I have to be careful with, because I don't know if they're ever going to really ask me this under oath or not. Even the glorified informants, Nick and Frank Calabrese Jr., and I've left Junior out of here a lot, and I apologize to Senior, God rest his soul. No offense, Frank. Everybody said John DeFranco had his hands very deep in this, and it was never indicted. Well, DeFranco is gone now. Do you understand how many millions of dollars in assets that they took from Diane Semino Calabrese? Before she passed away, Frank's mother, they threw her out of the home she'd been in her whole life when they seized it. The monies that they have taken away from the Spilotro estate, I don't know what was there, but I know that there's been restitution orders where monies have been collected and paid out. So think about it. And it's so simple and so small. If they would have done it anywhere between 05 and the end of the trial. Okay, Macelli's saying all this. We go dig a hole and either we bring Albergo up or we don't. Now, you got Nick Calabrese over here. Oh, yeah, we buried him at 35th and Shields in a parking lot or whatever. Wait, they dug the whole fucking thing up. They didn't find nothing but dog bones. And that's their star fucking witness. I'm begging them to go dig up a fucking forest preserve, and they don't want to go do it the right way. But the difference is they got the convictions, reaped in all this money, all this glory. People got promoted. People got time on TV. The big newspapers all picked it up. Everybody's glorified. While these guys, I'm not going to sit here and bullshit you. Not one of them was fucking St. Peter.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
But under the laws of our country, there's a reason that the scales of justice, the woman that's on there has a blindfold on. You're not supposed to see race, creed, color, wealth. You look at the crime, the evidence for the crime, the witnesses for the crime, and the facts of the crime. Nothing else should matter. I could be the nicest guy in the world or the biggest jagoff on the face of the earth. When I walk in that courtroom and I go before that jury, the facts and those things are the only thing that should be weighed, not who I am, what I've done. Look at all these fucking diddlers and pedophiles. They go in there, oh, get a slap on the wrist because he's this or he's that. But some poor guy that stole a loaf of bread to feed his family because he's got a gang tattoo on him, they give him 25 fucking years. Explain that one to me.
No, that's been a big thing that we've been trying to bring light to, is how they can throw those types of charges on people that do not deserve it. And like you said, deservedly so, at the same time, not put the charges on people that deserve to probably never see the light of day. They come up with, like you said, some fucking excuse of why they are the way they are. And that shit just gets me irritated as hell.
Wade, you're so correct. You know, I did 20 years in prison plus, okay? I seen it all. I walked the open compound as a cop, as a witness, and maybe in another show we could talk about the Pamela Strauss case. Mm-hmm. But as a former witness, as a cop, as somebody that everybody on the compound knew what I was doing for Joe. So it wasn't like a secret that I was trying to testify. In protective custody, out of protective custody, these fucking child molesters, that it's not like, oh, the girlfriend got mad and said, he did this to little Johnny or little Susie. There's DNA evidence. There's witnesses. There's confessions. Do you know they get mollycoddled more in the prisons, and they get more rights and privileges than a guy that did a theft or a white collar crime? You know, I've got friends of mine that I know from, there's a couple things I can't talk about, but there's a special protective custody unit in one location I was at in Florida. I did time with John Connolly. Do you know who he is?
Yeah, he's connected with Whitey Bulger. He was the guy that was feeding all the information to.
Right. Mr. Connolly and a guy named Mikey Flynn, who was part of the Cocaine Cowboys. He was a Miami Metro-Dade police officer. Were my personal friends. We used to sit and have breakfast every morning together and shoot the shit, cop talk. And we were friends because we were all cops, and I know more about Whitey than I even want to talk about. But I'll tell you something. We'd sit there and we'd look around the room and we'd wonder why a guy that took a baby and put a baby in a fucking microwave is given protective custody. And then this guy comes in 6 foot tall, all roided up from being in prison all of his life. And he wants to run the protective custody pod where guys like, us cops or former politicians or, stole money or whatever are at, or like Mr. Conley was, or Mikey Flynn or myself. Not saying that we're any less, but you can commit the most heinous crime there is on the planet, and the fucking system will fucking rock you in its arms like a fucking baby. How do you explain that to me?
You can't. You cannot explain it, and it's mind-boggling. That's works. I've talked to a few people that's done major stints in prison. One being a guy by the name of Ciro DiPaggio, and he said that same thing. He'd done like 19 years, and he was like, believe me, he said, if the opportunity presented itself, he said they would all do what they had to do. But he said the second they come in, they're carted off to protective custody, and as you can't get their hands on them, and they're in there with basically they can sit around with other guys that do the same shit, so they can swap stories and fucking fantasies and whatever else these sick fucks do.
Oh, you wouldn't believe the things I've seen in 20 years. But this is to my point. Joe Lombardo, Mike Marcello are sitting in underground or semi-underground ADX Florence, Colorado. McVeigh,
Randy
Rockman, all these people that were a danger to the entire world if they have communications. You want to tell me how you justify? I mean, I agree. If you threaten a federal judge or U.S. attorney, it happens every day that these gangbangers go out there and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. I do not condone, very clearly, harming anybody in law enforcement. I was an officer myself. As long as the cop's doing his job clean and he's not planting dope and drugs and guns and stuff like that, I have nothing but respect for police officers, firefighters, paramedics, doctors. I don't think lawyers, they're all whores, but, a federal judge. But here's my point. What is an 80-year-old guy possibly going to fucking do that warrants putting him in ADX Florence?
Yeah.
That was in the mob.
That one's always kind of got me too, because like you said, that was houses like, Ramzi Youssef, who was responsible for the first Twin Tower bombing, the one that went off in the basement and didn't cause nowhere near the amount of destruction that the planes did later. Timothy McVeigh, I think T.D. Bingham may have been in there too. He led the Aryan Brotherhood along with Barry Mills. You're talking top-notch guys, leaders of organizations that, I'm not going to say where anybody deserves to be. It's not my place, but he didn't fit the mold of other guys that were there. I'll put it like that.
And I know this is going to sound shitty coming from me, especially, but if he was alive, I could see a Sam Giancana going there. Because if a man can make a president and control the things that Momo controlled, I could see a justification. What they're doing to Marcello and they did to Joe was just punitive. And I'm gonna go one step further on the record. Do you know that Zagel didn't even have the legal right to do what he did? Because a judge, let's just take a hypothetical. Say you got mad at a judge and you were in court and you said, Judge, I'm going to do XYZ PDQ to you. Okay. That judge at that point, if they charge you or they're going to do any type of punishment against you, has to recuse himself or herself, cannot be the one to order to send you there. Cannot be a part in the decisions of whether you stay there, because it's no way to be impartial.
Yeah, it's a conflict of interest at that point. If you've been threatened, because whatever sentence you make could be, compared to, oh, he said he was going to do this, well, I'm going to do this. So yeah, you're absolutely right. They would have had to excuse themselves. Someone else would have had to come in and make an impartial decision on where those guys are going to go to spend their time incarcerated.
And that never happened with Joe Lombardo. When Joe Lombardo's attorney, David Bernstein, who wrote a letter for me, which you have, by the way, was trying to get Joe out of there, and back to a hospital, Judge Zagel was still making the rulings. How do you do that? You're putting him there saying that you're going to kill me and I'm going to give you a fair fucking ruling? Come on. I mean, it's so fucking ridiculous. It's not even laughable. It's pathetic.
Yeah.
I'd like to see them go on your podcast, or one of your guests that's an ATF agent or an FBI agent or a former judge or a lawyer like Paul Whitcomb, who's my friend through Joe Seifert. Have somebody on there like that. Paul was a law clerk for Judge Plunkett during one of the trials of Sam Carlisi. And Paul and I talk all the time. And I asked Paul, and he says, Chuck, you know what? I've been practicing law a long time. You're not wrong. You're dead right.
Yeah. And I mean, speaking of people that practice in law, it was a little sidebar that I found when I was researching, a few things to talk about. Tony Spilatra had a nephew that was also a lawyer, and he actually defended Rocco Lombardo on a case, who was obviously Joey Lombardo's brother. I wasn't aware that he had a family member that was a lawyer. I don't think that's really anything that's been too much put in the forefront.
I think that was something that was kept low key.
Okay.
I don't know him. I think a lot of people, I won't say who, but there was a very high level person in organized crime, like top shelf, whose daughter became an assistant state's attorney in Cook County.
Wow.
And I mean, he was like in the top two. And I won't mention her name, but she got married and of course went on with her career, and she had a very long career in the Cook County State's Attorney's office and is a very successful attorney. Yeah, well, look at what they're doing to Ricardo's grandson all the time, the football player. This kid is a amazing athlete, scholar, and everything else, and it's Tony Ricardo's great grandson. I mean, not that Tony was a bad guy. I'd be afraid to tackle the motherfucker. Somebody might clip me, but
Yeah, I would. I'd probably let him get by me too. That'd be an arm tackle for sure. Don't want to be the guy that put a stop to his running the ball. Chuck, man, I've had a blast on this show having you on and getting a lot of this stuff out to light. Because there's been a lot of people that talk a lot, about certain things. I've always found it's better when you can go straight to the source, get people that were there, get people that, knew these people, and not somebody that states away, that's going off what they think they heard or think they saw or think they know. I mean, look, I'm 38 years old. I don't know anybody that can see fucking 5 states away. It's not going to happen. No. So I go straight to the source. I talk with who it is. Now, a guy that we've mentioned a few times in here, he's been a guest on our show when we first started out, is Red Wilmette. Now, he was involved in a little bit of what we've discussed here today, not to maybe the extent that you were, but you guys kind of had different paths almost. And we've talked about this. You were kind of when you were first coming in and making your way, he was kind of making his way out. So
yeah, under the carpet.
Not a lot of intermingling between you two, but he's got his version of events and you've got yours. And at some point, if you're okay with it, I'd like to get both you guys on the show and we can kind of discuss this. And I think it would be
I would love to do, and Red, I would love, I have respect for your age.
Mhm.
I have respect for you as a person, as my elder. I would love to do a show with Red, but the one thing that I would, like I told you, privately when we spoke, um, I'm gonna call him if he says something that's not true. And he's welcome to call me on it. And while I'm mentioning that, any of the documents that I gave you, I don't know how you air your podcast, be free to post them. Because
okay.
it's
I
all
was going to
public
ask
record.
you about that if those were kind of something to be kept, between you and I. But if you're
No,
okay with it, then yes.
it's all public record now.
Okay.
Anything that's gonna prove to your audience the truth, I'm all about the truth. And if you ever get any questions or feedback on it, I'll be more than glad to come on anytime, that I can and, answer anybody's questions. My life is an open book. All I want to do is clear my name, tell the truth, and try to do what I think is right and hold the people accountable that need to be held accountable. And I know Red did a lot of good in what he tried to do, but I also know that he did it for personal reasons. And he shouldn't sugarcoat that. If I can come on here and air what my relationship was to Joe and how I fucked up and how I made the mistakes, nobody put me in prison but me. Nobody made the bad decisions I made but me. Nobody put a gun in my hand but me. Nobody made me launder money but me. Okay. I was never extorted because I just wouldn't tolerate that. But, Red should be man enough to say, hey, I got myself into this and into that, and not try to like glorify it like I'm some Billy Badass. He was getting put down on, they were using him like a pimp. And, he got tired of it and decided to do something about it. I'm not taking anything away from that. It took brass balls to do what he did at the time that he did it, wiring up his apartment. But the only reason that he did it is because he got tired of them fucking him in the ass. I mean, that's just the way it was. I did what I did because I was betrayed by people.
Mhm.
I did stuff that's involved with the Spilatro case, because there's one person that may end up being indicted that I can't mention his name right now, that ended up owning a restaurant that Michael and Anthony owned called Hoagie's Pub afterwards. And this guy is a corrupt politician. I have a lot of evidence on him. I would love nothing better than to put him away because he betrayed my loyalty after being loyal to him for many, many years. It's a personal axe to grind. Am I going to go wipe out the entire hierarchy of the Chicago mob or every Tom, Dick, and Harry because I'm paying somebody $500 a week and I'm mad about it? No, I'm not. Man up. Hey, I did it because I got tired of paying out. It's not like they did something personal to him or he had some glorified reason for, oh, I became a federal witness because I wanted to bring peace and love and joy to the earth. He did it because he did it. And you can't glorify it. And I did what I did for reasons I did it for. And that's why I don't hide it. I'm ashamed of some of the things I did, but I'm not ashamed of why I did them. And I'll never be ashamed of the reasons that I cooperated with the government when I did. And I would love to do a show with you about a case involving Pamela Strauss in the near future because it needs to be told.
Absolutely. For sure. We can do that. And then we'll try to line something up with you and Red, and you guys can, both state your cases and give him a chance to defend himself, and then you as well. Before we get out of here, you had mentioned that you were writing a book. Now, is this something that's coming? Is it already out or is it going to be out soon?
No, we're working on it. We're in the fledgling stages of it. I was working with some people and I wasn't very pleased with them, so I changed it.
Okay.
And now I'm working actually with Scott Bernstein and some of his people.
Okay.
And I can't really disclose what's going on, but there's something big. There's something very big coming down the pike.
Okay.
And as you well know, it's a process.
Oh, yeah.
But my story is kind of like expansive because it's got like all these little tentacles. There will be one book coming out called Dead Witnesses Don't Testify. That'll be the Pamela Strauss story. No, I didn't murder a woman. This is something totally unrelated. And then there's going to be a something I'm doing with Joey Seifert about Joe Lombardo. And, you know, if you want to see things and hear more about what I've done, they can go on Joey's Social Club on YouTube or any of the channels like you have, or contact Joey Seifert or Scott Bernstein at Original Gangster Report.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you know, I've just done one. In fact, I'm going to be Scott's first live one on video. We've got some technical problems, but I'll be his first live video podcast, and that's coming out soon. The audio's out, but the actual live video is coming out soon too.
Okay. Yeah, I think I heard that one with you. I mean, Scott's a very knowledgeable guy, one of the top in the field at what he does. And, you know, he's able to get a lot more facts than most people because he's been in this, you know, for such a long time. And he's actually came on this podcast as well. It hasn't aired yet, but we done a deep dive into the Philadelphia mob, which he helped write the book on. You know, I think it was Mafia Prince, I think it was. So that's a good one that we're going to look forward to dropping here soon. Scott's a great guy. So I look forward to anything that you guys have coming out for sure. I mean, keep me, you know, informed on the situation when things drop, and I'll definitely, you know, we can bring you back on the show and plug that and go over anything else you want to do.
And
But
the same with you. And I'll try, I won't make a promise, but I'll try to do something. I'll see if I can get my good friend Carl Mano to come on for you and talk about his grandfather a little bit.
Absolutely. That would be, you know, a pleasure to have him on. I've seen a few podcasts, you know, with you two together. I think it was Tony Ocean's podcast that you did.
Yeah.
So yeah, if he would come on, man, I'd be more than happy to have him on. You know, I can't thank you enough for coming on here, man. I appreciate when people take the time to come out here and, you know, set the record straight on a few things and give me their time and tell their story on this platform. I know our audience will enjoy it. In closing, is there anything else you'd like to leave us with, or you think we're pretty good right now?
I think we're pretty good. Thank you. It's a pleasure to meet you, Wade, and God bless.
Same to you. Well, that about does it, folks. I am Hollywood Wade. That was Chuck Macelli. And unfortunately, we are out of time. Tune in next week for an all new episode, Crime and Entertainment. Chuck, we appreciate it, my friend.